Before we get started, a quick word from our sponsor, Community Financial's President CEO Tansley Stern podcast, Despite Impossible. Now on to the show. Studio Lounge interviews at Emerge, brought to you by Eltropy. Hey everybody, Mike Lawson here with CU Broadcast. Welcome back to our continued coverage of the 2025 Eltropy Emerge conference here in beautiful San Francisco. As you can see, the Golden Gate Bridge is in the background. What a view we have from this hotel. Isn't that amazing, Shannon?
Awesome.
Gosh.
And the conference has been awesome.
That too. And you were on stage yesterday in the collections panel, but we'll get to that in a second here. I'm going to get some of your, I've got to do an introduction. Where's my manners? Shannon Stewart here from, what credit union?
Southland Credit Union.
Is that Los Angeles?
Orange County, Los Angeles.
Okay, I'm in San Diego. So
Los Alamitos.
Right down the road from you,
yes.
sir. All right, well, it's good to have a neighbor in the studio lounge. And so before we get to the panel that you were on yesterday, how's the show going? Any highlights to share from Emerge this year?
Oh, man. Yeah, Ashish and his discussion yesterday as we started off the day. We kicked off the day yesterday. Mike, I was floored with some of the stuff Ashish talked about. But as he talked about figuring out how do you use technology to bridge in empathy, floored me. Because I think as collectors, we forget that. We forget the fact that you're dealing with people, real life, real problems. Right?
Yeah, he started off with like conversation, create that conversation.
Yes. And
that's what gets the ball rolling, especially in a collections environment. So share with me a little bit about your part in the collections session yesterday, because I thought that was one of the best. I think it was the last one yesterday, but it was hands down one of the best ones for sure. So
it's funny because I'm part of the legacy Lexhop group, right? And so we talked about this. Lexhop used to do a podcast, Collect and Connect, right? And we talk about my biggest piece outside of the collection space is I run a nonprofit. We do homeless care, financial literacy, financial wellness, mentorship, civic awareness. So there's an altruistic part to this collections piece. And I think part of that is understanding the use of technology to meet members where they are, to communicate with them like they want to be communicated with. Been doing collections since October 20th, 1997.
Wow.
And, as a sophomore in college, members don't want you to talk to them like you talked to them back in 97.
That is true.
And so those were some of the things that we talked about yesterday is how do we do this different?
Yeah.
How do we interact with
So what was different in 97 as opposed to 2025?
Well, I think the biggest thing, Mike, is that we're talking to people on the phone. In 1997, that was your thing.
Yeah.
And so I started off in the collection space. I was a collection supervisor. I managed a team of 12 misfits at Wells Fargo Bank. And then that grew. A couple of years later, I'm 23 years old. I'm managing a group of 46. We're looking at predictive dialing campaigns, looking at the Saturday newspaper because we worked from 6 a.m. to 3 p.m. to say, okay, well, let's look at the college football schedule going from East Coast to West Coast, and that's how we're going to set up our call campaigns today.
Okay.
Just to see if it worked. It was, you throw a dart at the wall, you see what sticks.
Right.
Now it's not like that. Now the landscape is communication is through phone, through text, through email.
Yeah.
People are rarely talking to you on the phone.
So what was your part yesterday? Because you had some great points that you want to share.
Well, so the biggest thing is understanding, as Mike People talked about his 15-year-old nephews. I have a 15-year-old son, and as I was and I talked about this yesterday, as I looked through his cell phone bill, I noticed that for a month there was not one phone call.
This is a great story.
And so I asked my wife, I go, hey, did someone steal his phone? Did something happen to his phone? Because there's no phone calls. And she goes, well, what are you talking about? The kids don't talk on the phone. I go, well, how in the hell did they communicate?
Right.
And she goes, well, they text.
Yeah.
And so I went and asked our tellers in the credit union, hey, do you call your boyfriend? No, I don't call my boyfriend. Do you call your mom and dad? No, I just text. And so it's showing me, like, we're going the way of the dinosaur. If I expect to just pound through phone calls, 100 phone calls a day, 7.25 hours on the phone, and I'm going the way of the dinosaur if I continue to communicate with people like I want to communicate with them.
Yeah, indeed. So how has Eltropy helped you guys at Southland kind of bridge that gap between 1997 and 2025 as far as texting and video and all that type of stuff?
So as we purpose to go in Q2, as we're moving the rest of our collection enterprise on the Eltropy platform, it's helped me talk to people and interact with people that I didn't interact with previously. I think the most important part of this, and I think collectors, if you look at the collections of old, is you focused on the later stage delinquencies instead of early intervention. Early intervention is key because that's where that relationship is built. If I'm calling you at 30 days or at 45 days to say, hey, you owe me money, your thought process might be like, how come you didn't call me 30 days ago?
Exactly.
And so when as we look at I think Mark talked about this in the first session, second session yesterday. He talked about the way of Blockbuster. You know, when I look at Blockbuster, during the time that Blockbuster was kind of phasing out, I worked for an FPO, BPO outsource firm where we did stuff for 21st Century Fox Home Entertainment. And I remember when the movie Avatar came out on Blu-ray. Like, that was like the hugest push.
Yeah.
You know, Target, Walmart, all these people buying millions of copies of this Avatar movie. Only for 4 months later for it to be phased out with Netflix, because you can get it for Netflix for $6.99 a month.
Exactly.
So it's the inability to understand where the landscapes, where things are moving to, and adjusting your business accordingly. And sometimes, particularly for credit unions, that's tough to do.
Well, and I think the texting allows you guys, I mean, phone calls do as well, but the texting, especially in today's game, like you pointed out, this is a primary channel for communication, obviously, especially with the younger generations. I think it's generation agnostic now. Everyone prefers texting.
Right.
So, but I think this allows you guys to be more proactive and kind of catching something before a situation gets worse with a member. So it allows you to reach out, like you said earlier, and get them back on the right track, so to speak, and play that empathy card, right?
But I think that here's what I picked up. I mean, I think the idea of conferences like Emerge and the unique ability of Eltropy to bring people together is to be able to have a think tank and to ideal share.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that was talked about yesterday. If you look at the customer base of Bank of America versus all of credit unions combined, if we shared information, how much better will we be?
Yeah, no doubt.
You know, I was reading an article in the Journal yesterday about the push to tax credit unions. A tax to credit unions would increase the federal budget by 2%. It's a nominal increase. But how would it cripple credit unions and our ability to adequately serve our members?
The entire industry would be flipped upside down.
But if we treat the credit unions like you would treat a fintech or you would treat a consumer financial firm and not share information, you know, we can't do that. And so what I'm seeing now is that it's the importance of being able to say, hey, I have this idea, and having a qualified source to bounce that idea off of.
Yeah, like you brought up Mark earlier, and from Filene, Mark Meyer from Filene, he also said, if we collectively share our data or collectively get together, I mean, we can compete with the Wells Fargos and the Chases, all that type of stuff. We can compete very effectively. And I've heard that story many, many times from people outside the industry looking at the credit union industry. Yeah, if you guys come together,
it would work.
And it would work for sure. Yeah. So I don't want to go down too far on that on that tangent, but kind of wrap up question here. Where do you see this going in the next 5 to 10 years? I mean, if you can get your crystal ball out. I mean, I know it's kind of hard call, but it seems like the texting obviously is very, very effective.
Well, I think the texting is a big piece, but also with the other collections avenues that Eltropy offers. So, you know, with the texting, the email, the ability to self-cure, the ability to self-manage. You know, I think we have to, as you look at the human element of it, delinquency is embarrassing in a lot of instances.
It is, yeah. There's a pride.
Years ago, I ran an organization where we did deed in lieu of foreclosure for Fannie Mae that were Bank of America service loans, right? Now, I remember the first tranche of accounts, they told me it would be like 10,000 accounts. It was 52,600 foreclosed properties in the Florida area.
Wow.
And I remember because it was such a staggering number.
Yeah.
And one thing I remember making the first phone call, like actually speaking to somebody. And I said, listen, man, we sent you a check for $8,000. Your property's worth $175,000. We need you to deed the property over to us. Why did you call us back? And he said, I was embarrassed.
Yeah.
And so I think as we look at that, that early intervention allows us not to be embarrassed. If I call you early on, and you're like, hey, man, look, I got some things going on at work. I may not be able to do this.
Right.
Hey, I got a text from you. You reached out to me. I'm glad you reached out. I got some stuff going on. Okay, now I can help you. You're going to be less embarrassed. Because it's not reactive. I'm reaching out to you proactively.
For sure.
It's relational.
Well, that gives you the time to make those plans and make those adjustments and things like that.
Right.
Take the steps to remedy the situation. So,
Yep.
Good stuff, man. All right. Anything else to add before I unleash you onto the rest of the show, sir?
No. Listen, if you missed an Emerge conference, and if you have not gone to an Emerge conference, next year you should be here.
Indeed.
Because if this one has been this great and we're only on day 2,
I know.
How great would it be next year? I mean, Ashish may come in on an elephant. I don't know. we don't know what could happen next.
I would like to see that, and I wouldn't put that past him either. All right, Shannon, thank you so much for hanging out with me for a few minutes, and the great stuff that you guys are doing at Southland. Keep up the good work, sir.
Thank you.
Right on, man.
Studio Lounge interviews at Emerge, brought to you by Eltropy. A quick word from our sponsor, Community Financial's President CEO Tansley Stern's new podcast, Despite Impossible.